at Framework. We are starting a new series today about video games, specifically role playing games, through the lens of the Bioware company, which is known for role playing games, most notably the Mass Effect and Dragon Age franchises. Today, we're reaching back to their earliest roots to look at their Dungeons and Dragons simulator for the PC in the late 90s, the Baldur's Gate series. Um, and that's where we're going to go today. I am Al Schwartz. With me, as always, is my partner, John Bernard.
Hey, hello, it's me.
And we have brought in a very special guest today to shed some light on the PC gaming environment of the 90s, Mr. Brad Millette.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Brad, did I get anything wrong in that intro for starters?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So, BioWare is a company that specializes in role playing games, and they got their start in the late 90s. I had thought that Baldur's Gate was their first game, but you told me earlier that that's not actually true.
They actually had a game earlier that was a kind of a ripoff of Mech Warrior, like those kinds of things, called Shattered Steel. And it was a first-person mech game.
Like a shooter?
It was it was a first-person like shooter based on driving a big mech around.
There's like this whole world of mech games that I've never delved into. Are they like experience point based as well? I mean, it's upgrading a mech, I suppose. Is that part of the
no, I don't think so. I think it was just a straight up action game. I never actually played it. I just know it exists.
Yeah.
Well, BioWare really found its groove with this single player turn based role playing games. I guess classical Western RPGs, you would call them.
Yeah.
And this, I guess, Baldur's Gate and Fallout were their first forays. The Fallout series is still going today.
I don't know that Fallout was specifically BioWare, but I know that there were a lot of conjunction.
That was Obsidian. They have overlap with that company.
Yeah, Black Isle, which then became Obsidian.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's so. I guess they really got their feet under them with this with Baldur's Gate, which is their Dungeons and Dragons port. I say port because my contention here is that this is an impressive game in many ways, but it's almost not even a game. Like they don't make a real effort to turn Dungeons and Dragons into a video game. They're really just it's almost like The Sims for a tabletop role playing game. Like it's they're not gamifying it. They're just porting over these second edition Dungeons and Dragons rules as directly as they possibly can in the software available at the time.
It's kind of what's cool about it, really. I mean, that it's doing that specifically is it really makes it feel different and kind of creates stuff that you don't ever see up until this point. At least that I hadn't. I mean, I'm sure everything's built off of something, but
it is what is cool about it, and also what makes it a bit unplayable today.
Well,
but so to get started with this, let's just do an overview.
I will say that at the time, it was amazing because it did actually work.
Yeah, it does. It's still functional.
It's what we had, and I remember reading an issue of Next Generation magazine. Do you remember that?
No, was that a competitor of Wizard or something?
Well, it was a video game magazine, and they had
like Nintendo Power era.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Like a little after that, early 90s. Next Generation was they had this spread about Baldur's Gate 1, and it had an image of the party fighting a red dragon, which was, for me as like a 13-year-old kid, was like, oh my god, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Also, something that doesn't make it into the game. there are no dragons in
There's
this
no
Dungeons and
dragon waiting
Dragons
at the
game.
end of that game? God damn.
No,
Okay.
no.
There are definitely dragons in 2.
Yes, but not in one. uh, we'll return to that later on, though. But yeah, so I guess let's look at it this way, because I'm amazed. For me, I had been was familiar with Dungeons and Dragons rules before this game came out, and I had always been frustrated because I only had one other friend that wanted to play with me, and so we could never get a proper campaign going. And when this, I got this box that came with like 6 CDs that you had to install over the course of like 3 months uh, on your old 90s brick of a computer. It's like, this is great. I can put all this knowledge that I have gleaned from perusing these manuals for so long to work now in a context where I can get like sort of a full campaign. Um, and that was very exciting to me, and I got a lot of hours out of it, a lot of enjoyment out of it. Um, but it's a very different experience coming to it now. Uh, and I'm amazed this became popular, because I have no idea how, if I hadn't already known all those rules inside and out, how I ever would have gotten started on this game.
I feel like this game is, this is looking for the person who wants to get really obsessed with numbers and stats. I mean, and that those people
Certainly.
exist for sure, especially back then. I would think, when anyone who was using a PC probably had to go through some hoops to get a game running on it. A little more so than now, than now, and it also, this was a computer game as opposed to a console game. Those always were more complicated. They felt more complicated at the time. I think that's probably why I was not aware of this game when it came out, despite playing second edition Dungeons and Dragons with my friends, or some version of it, some kid's version of it, where we don't really apply all the more difficult rules. But I was playing Mario Brothers at this point, Mario 3, Legend of Zelda. That's where I was, and this missed me completely at the time. I mean, the only computer games I really have much memory of would like the adventure games, the Monkey Islands, things like that, which I guess are probably a little after this, huh?
No, I think they were about the same time.
Mm.
Monkey Island, I think, was probably before Baldur's Gate 1.
It had sort of a D&D quest feel to it. Obviously, the mechanics weren't the same.
I mean, the real like comparison of adventure games would be the Quest for Glory series.
Okay, I don't even know that one. I mean, is it related to King's Quest? That would have been the.
It's from Sierra. It's
Okay.
from Sierra, so it is related to King's Quest, but it's like more of a role playing game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not role playing particularly in Monkey Island. It's just
right. Yeah, you're
no
just
stats, yeah.
You're just going through the the puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But Quest for Glory was an attempt, maybe not a great attempt, at actually melding role-playing games with the adventure games.
It seemed like a natural fit. I don't know how you'd go about doing that, though. I mean, it seems like a direct transposition of D&D rules is Baldur's Gate.
Yeah, I mean, does it just look like Baldur's Gate with more puzzles and like riddles integrated into it?
Yeah, it was kind of like you had like different paths that you could take in terms of puzzle solving and dealing with issues. Like you could actually be more of like an offensive character that would attack.
Mm.
Whereas
there's different multiple ways to skin the cat in those.
Yes,
but
yeah.
It's not just finding the one solution. Like,
right.
I don't know, Dragon's Quest or something, or what's the one with Dirk? Dragon's Lair.
Dragon's Lair.
Yeah. That's what. Yeah, but there's one solution to each obstacle.
That goddamn game, yeah.
The quarter sucker.
Yeah.
But it drew me in. I was so obsessed with that when I was So
I mean, Don Bluth was an amazing animator.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so appealing to a kid, and and playing a cartoon, and then the experience of playing it, of course, is just oh, I didn't push the button
It's
when I
just
was
like,
supposed to
oh,
intend to.
I put in 50 cents, and 30 seconds later, I need to put in 50 more cents.
Yeah.
Yeah. But really, that actually ties into, I think, what Bioware will become later on. That you're right. When I was 8 years old, like, oh, I'm playing a cartoon. That was exciting, even in that crude form. And now, what I love so much about Mass Effect is like I get to play a Star Wars movie. Like that's the appeal. It's much more elaborate, but
What I
uh,
loved about Mass Effect 2 was that it felt like playing through a season
of a
of
TV show.
like a
Yeah,
really good TV show.
Oh, we've talked
absolutely.
about this before. Yeah, I mean, that
Yeah.
series is so well suited to the season format, and
Mm.
like that would be a slam dunk, I would think, on a streaming
Yeah, I mean,
show.
and Dragon Age is sort of like playing through a season of Game of Thrones almost, and
Especially,
that's great. I mean, I don't want to get too off on that because we'll get to
Yeah,
those
yeah.
games
yeah.
eventually in like
Mhm.
2024 or something. But the thing about Baldur's Gate, I'll say, is that Baldur's Gate does not really succeed on that level.
Yeah,
Um,
Baldur's Gate is like baby steps.
yeah. Um, so we'll circle back to that in a bit. But the thing we keep talking about here is how it's just a straight port of the mechanics of second edition Dungeons and Dragons to a computer setting. So we need to go over a little bit of how insane those rules are,
Okay,
and how yeah,
first off, 2-hit armor class 0
yeah.
is the most ridiculous rule ever written for any tabletop game.
This is what's incredible. It's if you were building this as a game from scratch, like you would never come up with any of this stuff. Like especially like 2-hit armor class 0. First of all, there's armor class involved there too. These are two of the most important stats in the game, where you want to have low scores in these stats. Low scores are better, but when you get a +1 weapon or armor, that +1 is good, which means it actually lowers your armor class by 1 instead of adding 1 to it, or it lowers your THACO, they call
It
it.
literally makes no sense.
It's insane. And then you have your statistics, which are different attributes. You got there's 6 of them. There's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Okay, uh, that's fine, but it's not like your rating in that is on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 through 100 even. No, it's on 1 to 18 because obviously it's like whoever designed this was using those math books with the base 6 crap from The Simpsons. And it just since that's not complicated enough, there's also something that with strength, if you get the max score 18, uh, you then roll additional dice to see you add like a percentage to it. So you can have like 18.32 or 18.91. And there's all these different gradations depending on what your percentage within the 18 score is. It doesn't just go to 19, it goes 18 and 44%. And that just comes in. And that's only strength, by the way. That doesn't happen with any other the other 5 attributes.
This is why our teachers in high school wanted us to learn algebra.
Honestly, in our last we did a sort of Dungeons and Dragons tabletop focused episode. There's sort of like a prequel to this series, and I talked about how this like is a good way to like intro to algebra. Basically, you could teach us in schools. Um, uh, just for another thing to throw out there, the whole saving throw system.
Oh
That
God.
Oh
Oh
wow, yeah.
no. Oh no.
something else that you want to have lower scores in, and there's different ones, but you have a separate score for against poison attacks, and one for things that just cause death, and one for breath weapons. You're fighting dragons, and a different one for wands, and there's different modifiers applied to all of them. It is so baroque. Uh, it's just insanely difficult to parse.
That is a D&D original, right? The saving throw.
Yeah, I
That-
think so.
Yeah. It's certainly popularized by, if not created by, the original
But
series. Yeah.
but yeah, like second edition, the idea that you want the lower number is so
Sometimes,
confusing. And sometimes you want the higher number.
yeah,
It's
that's
It's ridiculous.
And it doesn't need to be that inconsistent. Like, you could do it. You could make the stat system where it is just 1 through 100 or 1 to 20, whatever.
I mean, with third edition, they just went with the D20 system, which is the higher number is the good number.
Yeah, even that's weird. Like, armor class is such a dumb thing. Like, because the base armor class, you might expect it to be 0 if you're not wearing any armor whatsoever and have nothing like modified.
Right.
But it's 10. And then when you put on armor, it lowers your armor class. It doesn't raise it. Like, it would be so simple to just have, like, okay, instead of THAC0, we have an attack score. Instead of armor class, we have a defense score. And you kind of like match those up against each other. But you can just make the math so much simpler with a modicum of thought.
Nothing about second edition, especially AD&D, makes any sense.
Okay, there's one other big one that I am so baffled by how they hatched this idea. So this is Dungeons and Dragons. It's fantasy stuff, sword and sorcery, you would say. So when it comes to the sorcery, the magic, right? You would think that you could be a wizard, and you can, but there's actually 2 different types of magic in Dungeons and Dragons. You have wizards and you have priests, which have a completely different magic system.
Excuse me, I believe they're called clerics.
Well, priests encompasses clerics and druids, Brad. Thank you very much. Yes, wizards encompasses mages and specialist mages of all stripes.
I believe you mean sorcerers.
Well, I don't think there were sorcerers in second edition.
I don't think there were sorcerers until third edition. Actually, you're right.
Or they're like 2.5, maybe. Anyway, we're making it even more complicated. But it's just the idea that there's 2 completely different magic using classes. Like, I don't know why they thought that was like normal or like a thing to make it a thing. But okay, that's not so bad. It's kind of interesting that there are 2 different like lanes of magic you could be in. But here's the other thing: the wizards or the priests both have different levels of spells. So there's first level wizard spells, second level wizard spells, 6th level wizard spells, right? And as you progress, your character gains levels in experience. You learn higher level spells. However, you don't learn second level wizard spells when your wizard reaches second level. You
just learn more level 1 spells.
Yes. So you get to second level wizard spells on like the 3rd level, and you get to 4th level wizard spells on like the 9th level or something. It's this asymmetrical nonsense. It doesn't even like follow a linear progression of like every other level you gain 1. It's this weird, totally arbitrary pathway.
Honestly, nothing about second edition makes any sense.
Yeah,
it doesn't. It just does not make sense. It's like playing a game that was designed by blind mole rats.
I mean, who were really good at math. And assumed everybody else was too.
It's like, okay, you know what it is?
Autistic blind mole rats.
It's like playing a game designed by the people that lived underground in that second Planet of the Apes movies.
No, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah,
those mutants that worshipped a nuclear bomb.
Yes, them.
Oh, the original Planet of the Apes movies. Okay, I was thinking the current
Beneath the Planet of the Apes. That's the one I'm talking about. Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
They live in the titular Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Yeah.
It's second edition was designed by them.
There's like apes getting crucified upside down and lit on fire in that movie. That's a weird one.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a weird one.
It is. That's the conversation for another day. So I guess my point of going through all these like weird, just completely counterintuitive rules is I have no idea how somebody who is just into like computer games coming into this cold could possibly be drawn in, like make it into this game more than like 30 minutes.
Well, the simple answer is because I didn't know any better.
So that was you, though. You were not a Dungeons and Dragons person until this game.
I was not really a Dungeons and Dragons guy. I liked the concept. I watched the cartoon as a kid.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I suspect if you had come to Dungeons and Dragons first, though, it would have had the same appeal.
yeah, I think so. I think so because it's kind of a thing where you have to force yourself into the idea.
Yeah.
That
You
is
have
very not the present day game design is not built around that idea.
right, right. It's very much not like present day game design where the game is around you. You have to sort of squish yourself into it and make it work.
Yeah, I mean that's true of Dungeons and Dragons regular as well. I mean,
Right.
any version of Dungeons and Dragons, there is a barrier to entrance, which is just you have to understand it. I mean, there's that involves buying books and reading the books, and and probably doing some practice runs, and a lot of stuff like that is just necessary to play actual Dungeons and Dragons, especially second edition AD&D, which is what it's called, uh, Advanced Dungeons and
That
Dragons.
I mean, that's the thing about this game, though. I think that we're going to come back to over and over again.
Yeah.
Like all its strengths are rooted in the fact that it is a straight port of tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, and all of its weaknesses are a result of being a straight, inflexible port of tabletop Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
But I do think one of its strengths is that it does all of that bullshit numbering for you.
yes.
Yeah,
And
it's certainly.
and you get to enjoy the story, which is very good in my opinion, without worrying about the dice. It just does it.
There's certainly that. I mean, and like if that's their goal they set out with, and it seems like it was, that it's very successful at creating a single player Dungeons and Dragons experience with an automated dungeon master, and that takes care of all of the math for you. But that doesn't mean that it is like a smooth playing
Oh no!
experience.
I'm
Right?
not saying that at all. I am not saying that at all
It,
because it is still fucking bizarre.
yeah. So that's the thing about this. As the thing that I found especially difficult going back to it now is, uh, it is a game where I feel like I spend the majority of my time not actually playing the game. Like I spend more time managing my enormous inventory and all of the
Mm-hmm.
spells and
Mm-hmm.
potions and abilities that my people are accumulating than I do actually walking around and interacting with the world and fighting things. Uh, I'm in menus for 50% of my
Yes.
playtime,
Yeah.
at least.
Mechanically, they are old and clumsy, and it's best that we leave them in the past.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
this
I mean, what you were saying earlier about how that I think that the progression in game design a is actual progress forward. That now there's an feeling of obligation to actually teach the player how to play the game and ease them into it and get them going, and not expecting the player to have done just a massive amount of homework before getting started. This game, the PC game, came with like 100-page instruction manual.
God.
And I'm saying and this is leaping forward in time, obviously, but it's like Mass Effect compared to Mass Effect 2.
Yeah, to a degree. I mean,
To a degree. Not
Mass Effect certainly has like the inventory problem of you're spending way too much time messing with that, but it's also a lot easier to just run around and interact in the world and just experience the game that way.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I find Mass Effect 1, the original version, to be much easier to play than either Baldur's Gate game.
Absolutely. That just brings me to something here because when we decided to do this series, and I sort of, and I apologize to John. I tasked him with trying to play through this game, and I was going to go back and do it too. And we're doing it on consoles now because that's where the ports are and it's easiest for us. And this game, not designed for consoles, so it's even a bit extra clunky in that sense.
I think extra would be underselling it. I had never played this game. I was excited to play this game. I had heard about this game for years. I have multiple friends in my life right now who still talk about this game, who have private little jokes I don't understand regarding this game.
Go for the eyes, boo!
Yeah, and Minskin
That's
is.
definitely one.
I've heard about the Minskin and his space hamster so much, and like finding him in the game was just like, aha, yeah, okay, there he is. Like all this stuff.
But then, like, that's it.
Yeah, and he has
I'll
like.
get, I'll get back to Minsk.
I think a lot of that the love, the enduring love for this game is really based more out of the sequel than the original.
I think a lot of it is based on the characters, and that's what I want to get to later.
Yeah. Well, so here
I tried. Is my point.
Yeah.
And you did a good job.
I did not do a good job. I played I think in total about 10 hours of this. And then
You did a good job.
I kept coming back to it and being like, I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna muscle through this. I'm gonna make sense of this inventory. I'm gonna figure out how to carry things back to town and sell them. I'm gonna check out the side quests. I'm gonna do it all. And I kept paring this list of objectives down, just in my head, just like, okay, maybe I don't need to follow every side quest. That's for a BioWare game, and me that would be a new way of playing it, but this all the hassle, the fiddliness of this, maybe I could just go straight line the story, okay, maybe I don't need to play on hard difficulty, maybe I can nudge that down a little just to get through these encounters, because then I got to reset it, and it became uh, a list of things I just kept cutting that were important to me, just to kind of mainline the thing. And got to the point when the game felt like it was playing me, I would say. I don't know that I'm going to finish it. Yeah.
That is what I was kind of going to get at, though, that when I went back to do this, I really thought, okay, because I played this so much when I was a kid, but I never finished it when I was a kid, because I thought that was just because I would get into it and I would get a little farther each time, but then I would like regret, like, oh, I want to, like, I missed that party member, or I want to do things differently. I want to redo my character, and so I keep going back. And I probably started this game 10 or 12 times when I was a kid, and never made it to the city of Baldur's Gate, um, and never finished it. And then I thought, as an adult, okay, I'm going back now. I've got this, understanding of the rules, and very, I can go through here. I'll do it on a lower difficulty level, and I kind of want to role play it this time, just like not spend all my time stressing out how to, like, squeeze one more +1 to Thaco out of my gear, and just I'll take the characters that I think are most interesting instead of the ones that are the strongest necessarily, and play it that way, like the way I think a Bioware game is supposed to be played these days, because now they're all about party interactions and party relationships. And turns out Baldur's Gate 1 does not work in that way at all.
Yeah, that immersiveness, I didn't feel. I didn't feel I had a connection.
I will say this, that Baldur's Gate was based on tactics.
Absolutely.
And I can explain with a encounter that I did in my playthrough of the first game, where I had a party member throw a bottle of oil into a room full of enemies, and then had the wizard in my party cast fireball, and it was amazing.
It's so D&D. Yeah.
Yes, it is so D&D. But I think the problem with Baldur's Gate 2, is the 2E system. It was weird. It didn't really work. And it wasn't until 3rd edition that the game really became, available to everybody.
That makes sense. I would say that one thing that I noticed was very different in the experience of playing Dungeons and Dragons and playing Baldur's Gate was that the encounters happening in video game real time, when you can pause and change the things. I'm used to encountering D&D taking 45 minutes at like minimum, maybe longer, depending on how creative everyone wants to get, how big the swarm is or whatever you're fighting. And in this game, it can be over in seconds, and if you screwed up and died, then because that
Well,
happens quite a bit, then it just becomes a good thing I saved 4 minutes
that
ago.
is part of the thing as a tactical game, is that you find out that the biggest, most difficult fights, uh, they either tend to be over very quickly and you win, or they drag on and you lose. And so there's something like that. It's also like what I mean when I say it doesn't work as like a role playing thing, where you can't really, even at lower difficulties, just sort of walk around and stumble onto an encounter and then deal with it uh, in real time. Even like pausing it and doing, it's like in even like non giant boss battles, just sort of like random encounters, you kind of have to get killed, reload your game, go into it with the foreknowledge of what you're up against, and adjust your tactics accordingly.
And this is the thing that I think all D&D video games are going to fail at, is that they're never going to be able to replicate the idea of a DM saying, okay.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big thing here. And this is what I think that the problem with this game is ultimately, that they they really are going for free choice, the open world sandbox thing. It's impressive how they have like designed this game where you really can. It lets you just attack and kill any person you encounter in this world, or try and steal from anybody in the world.
I mean, you don't want to, but
Yeah, I mean, if you try and kill every single person in this world, eventually, like the entire world will be against you and they'll kill you.
Yeah, that's
But
what happened when I tried that.
but but it gives you options. It gives you the option to try that with anybody. You can just go into a store and just kill the shopkeeper instead of bartering with them. But I mean, there are consequences to that. But uh, because the Dungeon Master is automated, it can't really uh, accommodate like real player creativity.
yes,
So
exactly.
it gives you tons of options, but like not all. It doesn't really have a way to deal with a lot of them. Um, like it gives you like 150 wizard spells to choose from.
Yeah.
Now, in a practical sense, I'm using the same like two spells at every level throughout this entire game. I don't need the other 15 spells that are available there. Like there's not a real use for most of them.
That was another thing I had the experience of with the spells. It becomes a thing where I'm used to those being used a little more sparingly than in playing D&D than I am in a video game setting where it's just spells, but
Yeah.
it's D&D rules. So you're like, oh, you used it twice, you got to camp, and that became a thing that I just camped a lot, so I could use my mages, or maybe I was even doing it wrong with them, but
No, I think that's how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to kind of like rest and save after every
Yeah.
single fight.
mm-hmm. Yeah,
It's not
well, I
Final
did.
Fantasy where
Yeah.
you just keep walking around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's about all there is to say about the mechanics of these games.
Yeah.
Well, one other, I mean, it's just a flip side of what you were just saying is that it does get a little. It makes the encounters a bit samey, because
Yeah.
like like I was saying earlier, how the fights are either over quickly or not. Because when you're up against like the hardest fights in this game are all against like not really monsters. It's not dragons. It's against other like humans. It's
It's
just like
multiple enemies.
yeah, it's multiple enemies and enemy wizards, and those are always the thing. So it's either you kill the enemy wizard in like the first turn of the battle, or they wipe you out. So
Or enough of you get wiped out that you have to reset the encounter.
yeah, exactly.
Baldur's Gate was made for save scumming.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And I think that hurts the role playing aspect of it.
Yes, they have not held up well.
And it's
But
so there's something a little unsatisfying to me about that too. That I mean, from a tactical standpoint, there is just the like even when you're save scumming, uh, and just replaying it over and over again, when you finally defeat it, there is a bit of a sense of satisfaction, but also it's a little anticlimactic. That it's hard to have a really knockdown, drag out fight that goes back and forth in this game. It's just a wipeout
Mm-hmm.
this way or a wipeout the other way is how it ends
Oh,
up
I,
working.
I agree. I agree with that.
Yeah.
I don't mean to like come down hard on this game. It's very clearly a game of its era, you know, and that I'm not playing in a suboptimal way on a console, you know, which is not built for it. I'm doing it on a PlayStation controller, and it's like, oh, this is made for a keyboard, obviously, and so you know, just like a perfect storm of ways to not enjoy Baldur's Gate when you know when I came to it, but even with that, it was still very clear, like this would be mind blowing at the time when this was released to me. Like I would have gotten into this. I would have figured out Thaco in a way that maybe I could still explain it. I'm not there with Thaco now.
They were extremely games of their time. They do not hold up now, but at the time, yes, they were mind blowing.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
I'm,
clear
I'm, t-
now.
I'm here to tell you that I played some of Baldur's Gate 2 in the last week, and I was shocked at how much, even on a console, how much more playable and how much more immediately fun that was. And that is, there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think the main one, I guess there's two main ones. The first main one is that it is BioWare starting to figure out its strengths and really making the characters more of a factor. Your party members are way more interactive
That's
in
what I
that
want to
way.
talk about next.
Yeah. But the other thing about it is just, I think it's just a reflection of, because this reflects my experience doing tabletop Dungeons and Dragons, or at least trying to. Um, like in a way, this is how good of a port of second edition Dungeons and Dragons that Baldur's Gate is, because in my real life Dungeons and Dragons experience, it always went this way. My friend and I that would play with me, we come up with a grand plan. We'd spend all our time like making characters, and we had an idea like how we wanted to end up, like what our ultimate villain. Like we're gonna build these guys up until they can fight this lich or this dragon, uh, and then it seemed like it took forever to get anywhere if you're following the rules. Like, and low level campaigns kind of suck, um, and we'd lose steam and just start over. And then when I played Baldur's Gate, like I was saying earlier, I would play through the first couple levels and I'd lose steam somewhere in the middle of the game and start over. Um, and then Baldur's Gate 2 just sort of uh, it's a great sequel in that it doesn't do the sequel role playing thing where it depowers you. It starts you out at like level 8 or 9, which is very high in Dungeons and Dragons. So you start out immediately like powerful, and and with and with some companions that are a lot of fun. Um, but because of that, it's just more satisfying there. Like it's still hard, but there's just something so much more satisfying about spend when you spend 30 minutes reloading a battle and just finally eking your way past a little group of 4 hobgoblins, because you finally got to a point where your guy didn't just get hit by one poison arrow and die immediately. Uh, that's like a little bit of a relief, but it's not satisfying. Whereas spending 90 minutes taking down a beholder or
Mm.
an actual dragon is satisfying in a different way. It feels like more of an accomplishment.
I mean, I would have to agree with that, but I couldn't have just started it too because it is a direct continuation of the Baldur's
That's
Gate
true.
story. That would have driven me mad. I would have completely been able to not check in because I'm missing the first half of this. I could just why don't I just go play the original because then I'll have a base for the story because ultimately this is about the story, right? I mean, the mechanics are almost just a barrier to get to the story, which is the real appeal and the control you have over it to
Well,
some extent.
that's what I
But
thought when I proposed this to you, and I found that that's not entirely the case for Baldur's Gate 1. There is a story there. It is it's not a great story compared to like later Bioware games. It's not a great story
oh
compared
no,
to Baldur's Gate 2. Um,
it really feels like D&D though. It really like here you can do anything. You have a mentor. He's disappeared. What are you gonna do? Go check that out?
but
Yeah,
you can
okay.
do anything, but it's not responsive in the same way
No.
because the Dungeon Master is an automated system.
I
Yeah.
think that's kind of what I wanted to get to is that this is the first steps of BioWare becoming BioWare.
Mhm.
because this is the first time that we really had delineated characters in an RPG for the PC.
That's how I remembered it, and I'm realizing now that I'm remembering that mostly through Baldur's Gate 2, because in Baldur's Gate 1, I think they're character sketches that you don't really get to interact with them very
Right.
much.
But there are some, and then in Baldur's Gate 2, it becomes definitely a straight story with
Yeah.
definite characters, a definite villain.
Oh, the villain is such a huge difference
Yeah.
between the first and the second one.
Yeah. And I want to get that in. They had a great voice cast.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I bet like John, for only getting 10 hours into this or whatever, like probably couldn't even tell us who the villain of Baldur's Gate
No,
was.
it's like there's a villain.
John Arenicus.
No, that's Baldur's Gate 2.
Yeah, that
Baldur's Gate 1, he's called Saravok, but
Saravok,
Saravok.
which
but, John,
and
but our John would have
he
no way of
shows
knowing.
up as Caravos, like it's
Yeah.
just his name backwards. Like fuck
Right.
you, Alucard.
Okay, I was
Right?
kind of thinking like maybe
It's very much like that. My favorite part of Batman Begins, where Liam Neeson shows up and says, he's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "My name is merely Descartes." And I'm like, just hold on, time out here, buddy. Nobody's name is just merely something. Okay, no human being. Brad's not gonna say, "My name's merely Brad Millette." I'm like, well, okay, alien that has replaced Brad.
Oh shit!
Sorry,
You know.
Well, so this all ties together, like gameplay and the role playing aspects. Because I, like I said earlier, I wanted to go into this to doing like a role playing thing and just say I'm gonna choose my party members based on personality, but you really can't do that. Like the because the difficulty is so punishing to start with, and then also because there's so little party interaction, it really pushes you to pick your party in a very utilitarian way to just maximize your effectiveness.
Right.
it was quite a
And
surprise to
that's kind of a
realize
bummer.
how many characters were going to get thrown at me and how early. I was like, oh wait, I can take him, I can take her.
Yeah.
And I got to leave somebody behind if I do that. But what happens? I want to take that guy to Narshkel. He was said he wanted to go. What am I just gonna? Is he gone forever if I drop him? And the answer to that appears to be sometimes.
Yeah.
So
Which I guess is kind of cool that it's not like fully,
yeah,
like gamified one way or the other, where it's you can always go back and do it, or where it's you got to do one. I mean, you lose things entirely. It makes it feel a little more organic that way, but also I don't know. It's also frustrating.
I think one thing that they didn't understand making Baldur's Gate 2 with so many party members available is that they went for quantity over quality. Like,
well, I think that's an issue in one too, isn't it? I feel like there's
but
an excess
both
of
of them. They didn't quite understand how to craft a party or a crew. And I think that's one thing that they learned in KOTOR and Mass Effect was
absolutely.
to absolutely make each party member be worthwhile.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, the great like innovation, I guess, that they come up with, it's just it's such a simple thing, but just doing shared experience with the party,
Oh
so
yeah,
that even the people when you don't have them with you, they're still leveling up with you.
Yes,
Because that's the other part that pushes you into this.
I do like that.
I want to switch. There's so many characters to choose from here. I want to switch up between them a lot, but also in this game, they have to be with you in order to gain levels and become more powerful.
right.
So there's a real a gameplay incentive to lock the crew you want for the end game.
That's not specific to BioWare. That's like
no.
every company had to learn that.
Yes.
Even fucking Nintendo had to learn that with Pokemon.
Yeah, and I mean, it was the thing with Final Fantasy too. Yeah, that's everybody had to go through that, but it really affected me here. It was a bummer to me that I wanted to like use everybody and do all their individual quests, but also they don't have very good long quests in this game. Baldur's Gate 2,
Yeah,
the character quests are much better.
There's not much of that. It's mostly just the main quest, and that's it.
Yeah. Oh, the other great thing about Baldur's Gate 2 is that by that point, because it's a higher level, it's not a low level campaign, and so they're not holding anything back as far as they have the monster manual flung completely open, and you know, it's kind of a bummer in Baldur's Gate 1 that you get through a Dungeons and Dragons game and never fight a dragon.
Yeah,
I,
I think I think that you end the first Baldur's Gate at like level 9.
it's like 7 or 8, I think,
Yeah, something like that.
which is probably big, like enough to fight a dragon. Maybe I don't know. I mean, they could obviously make a dragon just weak enough for you to fight it, but it's not just that. I mean, it's just there's all kinds of stuff. Like the most iconic stuff from the monster manual is not there. Like all the hardest fights, like I said, there's a mechanic in this game where when you look at a character's like page, it shows you what the strongest opponent they've defeated is within your party, which is a cool thing. I like to track that with all my party characters. But at the end of this game, I looked at all my guys, and all of them but one were just the name of a random person, like a random wizard. Um, you know, nobody had a mind flayer in there. Nobody had a dragon. One person had a greater basilisk. That's the biggest monster that you could fight. But
I think there were mind flayers in 2.
oh yeah, there absolutely are. No, that's what I'm saying. This is great about two. Two has dragons. Two has liches. Two has mind flayers, beholders. Everything is in there. Is in
Yeah,
the mix.
everything you
Fight,
want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are the
There's
big
not
fight?
even trolls in Baldur's Gate 1.
What are the big fights at the end of Baldur's Gate 1? What was I missing? I imagine a wizard, bad wizard.
It was
He's like a bad
Sarabok.
he's a bad warrior. He's got a party of his own, so he has like a wizard and a priest.
He's a death knight.
Okay.
Yeah, basically.
Okay. That's something. How about the biggest monster that you find in the game? Is you said
That's what I was just saying. It was a greater basilisk.
Oh man. Okay.
Yeah,
Which
there's
basilisk's attack is that it turns you to stone. So
Mhm.
either it kills you in one shot and the encounter's over, or you use the special protection for petrification thing, and then it's the easiest fight in the world. Like it's not
yeah,
a knockdown, drag out. Like
Yeah.
giant spiders is probably some of like the funnest big monsters you get to fight in this game.
yeah. In the first game, there's not a whole lot of like big climactic fights.
But in 2, you're all over the place, and you get, like I said, there's
There's
tons of beholders,
there's
tons of
dragons. It's Dragon Palooza.
yeah, there's vampires left and center. You're going through the Underdark and the Dark Elf Drow
Underdark.
City.
Yeah, maybe I should.
That's where that's where you find that's where like it delivers on the promise.
Mhm.
Finally, in a weird way, I'm impressed that they really committed to Baldur's Gate 1 being a low level campaign because they're holding so much back from you.
All right, I have to say something. I do remember a great moment from one of my own D&D campaigns where I was playing as a half-orc cleric that worshipped a rock that he had carved a smiley face into and called Rock. And I was allowed...
Did he at least spell it funny?
He just called it Rock. And I was allowed by the DM to throw it at a Drider, and I rolled a natural crit. And so the Drider, the spider face of it had a smiley face imprint and was just so confused by what had just happened that the DM then said, "Okay, you all have advantage."
That kind of organic moment is
that's the stuff that they can't do in the game.
really
in the
tough.
Yeah,
computer.
that's the stuff they can't do in a Baldur's Gate game, and I don't fault them for that.
No.
But I think they could have done better looking back with what they had. I think they could have made more dialogue choices, made more, combat options, things like that.
I mean, it is, yes. Like they did create this enduring classic that doesn't work if you come to it now, perhaps. But they, as trailblazers, isn't that just sort of what happens no matter what?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And let me remind you, I love these games.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't, and I'm even still like I can't say like like that's the game's fault. It's like my fault for playing it the way I did at the time I did, you know? Like it's hard to go home to 20-year-old video games in a way it isn't with other media. I think we've talked about this before. Like
Yeah,
it's
that's okay in
yeah.
a way.
Uh-huh.
That it does. A game doesn't have to hold up 20 years later the way that we hope a movie does. Even.
Yeah. It's yeah. Are there any old games that I could still play just like another? Maybe the simplest of Nintendo games. Maybe like Legend of Zelda, something like that. And even then, you'd be making allowances for the age and all that. So yeah, it,
I
I
got
mean,
a.
one that I would say holds up if you can get past like the fact that graphics have gotten so much better is System Shock 2 specifically.
that is the
I
the
don't know that one.
Bioshock first game, right? The one that kind of led to Bioshock, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of always been on my list. And I think the only reason I haven't played it at this point is because of that fear that it wouldn't hold up.
It does. It
Yeah.
does.
I
Please
mean,
believe me, it does.
I don't know. Like I got a Super Nintendo, or a mini version of Super Nintendo, just to play games with my stepson, uh, and just because when we were first getting to know each other, I was like, I don't know how to relate to kids. Like, here's some stuff I liked when I was a kid. Maybe you'll like this. And so it's kind of a shot in the dark. Like, but it really worked. Like he likes playing some of those games. We played the Final Fantasy games that are on Super Nintendo, and he liked those. We still played Donkey Kong Country uh, together sometimes. Like in Donkey Kong Country, maybe like those simple platformers can hold up in a way, uh,
Yeah.
but something like this, I guess, that's going for such an immersive experience, but just the technology has progressed so far past what it
Yeah,
is.
and
But
and I think again the reason that it doesn't hold up is mostly because it's based on second edition.
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
such a bizarre system that it just doesn't work.
well, that's my point, is that they didn't make an attempt to adapt that to a video game format. They just
Yeah,
transposed it.
yeah, they just went one to one. This
It's just all
is
there.
this is this. This is this.
It's a pretty impressive job that it works the way it does, actually, considering that was the idea, and it kind of they just played that out,
Yeah.
and it really does transpose that experience, aside from those special organic moments. But even those, there's things that make a stab at that, like you were talking about throwing the oil in the room and then lighting it on fire. That's and it's very D&D. That's it's pretty impressive that stuff just works in this game,
Yeah,
as old as it is. Yeah.
yeah, it when it works, but most of the time it's just you're fighting against it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean there are a lot of things like you can't fault the work they put into this. Like
No.
there are a lot of these encounters or things that they do come up with different ways to resolve them. But there's like three ways to resolve it. You as the player can't come up with something. I mean that's the funnest part of Dungeons and Dragons, or a role playing game generally, is something where the dungeon master sort of stops for a second and goes, okay, I guess so. Like, I didn't think of that. And that's just not possible in this format.
Right.
So it becomes a lot more about optimizing combat, because that's how you're going to resolve almost every encounter.
And
Um,
in second edition, combat is kind of a mess.
yes. But you know what? I will say something about this. I think there's something kind of genius that they work into the Baldur's Gate 2, and then it's not Baldur's Gate 3, I guess. Throne of Ball was an expansion that's basically Baldur's Gate 3. But so shit, John, I guess, didn't even get this far into Baldur's Gate 1 to realize like what it is. um,
Spoil it. It's fine. I'm okay.
well, okay, actually, but this goes up the difficulty of making a game like this, where you get to do Dungeons and Dragons character creation, where you have six races to choose from, or even more, like 7 or 8 races to choose from, and 2 genders, and uh, like 15 different iterations of classes. And so you have to create a story built around this character that somebody could have made a uh, chaotic evil halfling cleric, or they could have made a lawful good elven bard, and they have to start in the same place and progress through the same story in a way that makes sense for both those characters. Like that is that's a weird like storytelling hill to climb. And so this is the thing that then you see we'll probably track this through every BioWare game. How do you make the player character both uh, the most special person in the world and also a completely blank slate that has no defining characteristics until the player picks them up as an when they're already an adult.
They
Uh,
certainly figured that out. That is a
yeah,
trick they master, I would say.
yeah.
Uh,
So the thing
Yeah.
in the Baldur's Gate series, what your player character it turns out to be is that they are the son of the dead god Baal, uh,
it's
who is
cool.
the Lord of Murder,
It's pretty cool.
who was killed by another god, but had gone around doing his Zeus thing and
And
knocking up
that's who the final boss is your like brother
half brother.
Saravok, half brother Saravok.
Yes,
Man.
who wants to be the final ball spawn that will ascend to the godhood of the Lord, become the new Lord of
I
Murder.
will say this of Baldur's Gate, that opening cinematic still rules.
The opening of Baldur's Gate 2 is so much better, but everything is that way.
I mean,
Anyway,
And you will be the first to die.
and I will be the last. Yeah,
I mean, you're right. That rules. That's really cool. I wish I'd played this game all the way through now, so I would feel
uh, that's
really
the
good
thing is
about
you don't. But the story just kind of drops out. Like it's only like the beginning and the end where the story comes in,
it. Yeah,
and
yeah.
then there's just a lot of miscellaneous
Yeah, there's
plot.
just a lot of there's just a lot of like fucking about.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But the great thing about this though is that it because you are the spawn of the Lord of Murder, it becomes a thing later on where it plays off the game mechanics where you're no matter whether you're playing good or evil or neutral. I guess I don't know how anybody plays neutral uh, in any sort of role playing
I
context.
think
It's
I was
so weird.
playing neutral. I think I was like, I'm just gonna play both sides against one another.
Oh well, there's that. I mean, there's a
It,
thing in Dungeons and Dragons where like druids are committed to being true neutral, and it's just like the neutrals from Futurama.
What
It's,
makes a man turn neutral?
all I know is my
Is it
gut
lust
says
for
maybe.
power? Or is it just a heart full of neutrality?
Exactly. But so it's hard to create something that makes the character special in all those iterations. And the sort of cool thing about being the spawn of the Lord of Murder is that because the game mechanics push you to go around killing things no matter where you go, no matter how good you are, like still later on, people can kind of challenge you on that and be like, yes, you're a lawful good paladin, but you've also spent your entire adult life murdering everything you see. And so don't you think that's your father's influence on you?
oh,
And
is it that thing? It's like the James Bond thing.
kind of, yeah. I mean, I haven't played Throne of Ball, like the expansion, but that's the bit of reading up I did on it. It seems like that's a big part of it. And that's cool. They sort of like the game mechanics, how you
well,
have to murder so much stuff.
well, that's the sort of the game mechanic where, well, not mechanic, the ludonarrative dissonance thing, or
Yes.
and they actually make that part of the text in the original Baldur's Gate. That's it's really awesome, actually.
Yeah. I mean, they're working on that early on. I think
Mhm.
you also see them try some of that in Knights of the Republic 2, at least, which is something that we'll get into
I am going to play
later
that
on.
one. I played the first one. I'll definitely be able to play the second Nights.
That's actually not a BioWare game. It went back to Obsidian at
Right.
that point, but
Yeah. Uh-huh.
also like
It's spiritually a Bioware game, though.
oh, it absolutely is.
Yeah.
It's just using the KOTOR 1 engine, and also, I mean, just spoiler alert. I think uh, Knights of the Republic 2 is one of the great like undiscovered or unheralded gems of the video game world and the Star Wars world. It's like it's a fantastic story stuck in a bad game.
Its
Um,
reputation is kind of on the rise. I've noticed. I've
yeah,
seen that sentiment expressed other places, and I'm kind of eager to return to it because KOTOR 1 is sort of legendary. I remembered most of the things about KOTOR 1. I played it multiple times when I was a kid,
mm,
and then playing it again last year, I was like, yeah, this is great. I mean, it's creaky. It has its issues. Combat isn't as fun as I'd like it to be, but the story and the characters and the way that story is told are all still really fun and impressive, and they work. I
Yeah, and
played through the
that
game.
sets you up to agree to do this Baldur's Gate thing. Thinking, yeah, it'll probably be the same thing with worse graphics, but it,
Yep.
actually, they're still working out a lot of stuff.
um,
um,
but I'm
but
sure
they have
KOTOR
that.
2 has that, at least. It has that base level that as well, and it also, I'm curious to revisit all this stuff now with an eye to what it was doing a little bit more than just trying to get through it, because I only played that the once.
Yeah. Well, they definitely work in something there too, where they're trying to like do something with the ludo narrative thing there of like asking you at a certain point, what does it mean that you think you're the like best person in the world, but also you've killed 5,000 people in the course of this game. Um, so
Yeah,
yeah,
that is always a really good. It's something that they rarely address in a video game, especially where so much of the mechanic often is to kill waves of things.
yeah,
I can get why something like
yeah.
Uncharted is like, whatever. It's like an action movie, It's like an action movie, whatever.
Right. But Baldur's Gate at least works that in there. It's an inescapable part of the game mechanic, and so they start eventually realizing like, oh, we can make this a thing where it's also an inescapable part of your nature as
Hmm.
you know
I mean, we were talking about
the
Bioshock.
ball spawn.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
So that story, though, I mean, the story is, I mean, it's not the strongest thing by the nature of just being a D&D thing, but is it not the reason that the game is sort of legendary, sort of has this stature, is
I
such
would
a
say I would say the second game is why it's so
ah
legendary.
that's
okay.
what I came to.
Huh.
That really is it's a transition point, and in a way like that's what we should spend more time talking about, because that is where they take sort of the bones that they built in Baldur's Gate and start creating a Bioware actual like narrative and
Hmm.
interactive cast.
This is where BioWare became BioWare.
Yeah.
And
Huh.
a lot of it is because of the voice cast that they put together.
And it's also where Bioware got horny.
Yes, super
Which
horny, super horny.
that's I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun
They know what the
tracking the horny
people
stuff.
want.
They do. They're not wrong either.
I mean,
I mean,
Was it
sometimes it can get silly, but I mean, overall, I think introducing the romance mechanics does like add something to the game. Like it becomes weird. Like it would be very strange if they were if they were doing everything else they were doing to like create the party mechanics and the relationship stuff and make that so core to the experience of the game. Uh, and then we're also like by now in 2020, they would have to make a real effort to keep that sexless.
Baldur's Gate 2 is where BioWare started really leaning into the, romance options and like just having characters be, relatable to the player.
that seems like a crucial point to me. That seems like
It's
yeah.
it's absolutely a crucial point.
I was surprised at how it wasn't there in Baldur's Gate 1. I just kind of, because I had forgotten the specifics. Like I had blended the two together in my head playing when I was a kid, and I went back. It seems so obvious in hindsight that that would be a big part of the appeal here, and it seems like in Baldur's Gate 1 they just hadn't quite figured that out.
Yeah.
I get the sense with one they were kind of just like, let's just get the thing done, get a
Yeah,
game that works, and then it sounds like too is where they kind of start to feel their oats a little, like what can we actually
Mhm.
do here? What is cool about doing this as a video game? Something that we can't do with a tabletop game, maybe, stretch the rules, break the rules a little bit. That happens in two, from what I'm understanding here.
I mean, yeah, that's absolutely true. It's like that's when they also started to just really go at it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, another way of putting it, I think, is that it's where they started getting more into the storytelling aspect of it. That they're, you know, like I said, in Baldur's Gate 1, there is a story, but it's really kind of clustered to like the beginning and the end. And there's a big mushy middle where you can kind of wander around and do whatever you want. But there's not a lot of like mile markers. And the system they develop over time is like, the whole thing where there's side quests or missions, and then there's story missions that are mile markers that everybody hits at a certain point. But then there's times around there where you can kind of wander around. But
So how does it work in the second game? Like, is it the sex and romance relationship aspect of the game? Is it similar to what you see in KOTOR or even Dragon Age?
It just fades to black.
I don't mean the actual
oh
that. I
no,
mean,
you mean
you have to,
how
like,
do you
I'm
develop
giving
your
them
relationship
gifts.
to the point?
Yeah.
No, yeah, you have to develop relationships with characters.
Like, I
There's
know this guy likes scented fragrances, so I'm
all
going to
right.
give him,
Okay, there's one that you literally see her husband die in the first part of the game,
Mm.
and then you can get with her.
Is there a way to screw that up if you're like talking about her husband more, or like can you?
Oh
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah. There's always
absolutely.
ways to screw it up.
Yes,
No,
absolutely.
but,
Yes.
like, and I mean, it takes like a good chunk of the game to get to the point. You can't just like jump right to that.
And those are characters from the first Baldur's Gate game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you might have actually gotten to them in
who are
your
they?
even abbreviated form. Khalid and Jahira.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, I know Khalid and Jahira. Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Khalid, don't get too attached.
It wasn't.
Nobody did. Nobody liked it.
Yeah, he's a real Caden Olenko.
He dies very bad.
Yeah, so it's sort of interesting.
Could I not drop him then? Could I? Is he like you have to stick with him?
Well, if you drop him, she leaves with him.
Yeah. Well. Okay.
So this is interesting. This is really interesting about Baldur's Gate 2. It made this decision from a gameplay perspective is very interesting because they, like I said, you port your character over from Baldur's Gate 1 if you want to. You can create a new one, but you bring over the same exact character.
Yeah.
But you can't. You don't get to import a world state, I guess is what they would call it in later iterations. So
that does
your character
like
is fully
tech. Yeah.
It's full. Your character is fully customized to what you made him in Baldur's Gate 1, but then it sort of just sets you at like here's a canonical version of how Baldur's Gate 1 ended, and it means that you ended with the specific party of Imoen, Minsk, Dynahir, Khalid, and Jahira.
Interesting.
Because Minsk and Dynahir are a pair that can't leave or can't stay without each other, and Khalid and Jahira are too. But also, it opens up with your party has been like jumped and captured and by this mage that is the villain of the piece, and Khalid and Dynahir are killed in that in between games.
They
get
die
like
bad.
Hicks and Newts. Yeah, they're the Hicks and Newt of the transition.
Oh yeah, they die super bad.
That's interesting.
But Minsk and Jahira are still around to take with you.
It's narratively you can't avoid that. So
Nothing
I mean,
can
it's
be
almost
done.
Aerith,
Yeah.
Final Fantasy, but several years before.
Yeah, but it's also done between games. But it also it gives you an immediate like revenge thing against the villain of the new game that I guess you have with your stepfather in the first game in theory, but these are characters that you might have had in your party in the first game, so that means a lot more to you. But it also just means they start and you start out like busting out of the prison that this mage puts you in, so you start characterizing the villain in the opening sequence, as opposed to Baldur's Gate 1. I think one of the big failings of the game is that the villain, because I think they're still trying to like work around that whole idea of you can attack and kill anybody at any time, and so they can't really let you encounter him throughout the game. So you don't really, between the opening sequence where he kills your foster father and the end where you finally like confront him, you don't really have any interactions with him, and that makes her a weaker villain. Baldur's Gate 2, yeah, it's just a more developed plotline and story where it's much more interaction with the villain. He's voiced by David Warner, who just gives a fantastic.
Smarmy John Arenicus, voiced by David Warner, is chef kiss. Kiss.
That's so cool.
And he has real motivations and stuff. He's a great villain. Like he has a backstory that doesn't really make him sympathetic, but he has understandable motivations that are not just to
You know
own
what
the world.
is a weird connection? He is kind of similar to the bad guys in Star Trek Insurrection.
I don't think I saw that one.
Because he's an elf that is just like pulling his face back, and trying to go for immortality, pulling his face back. It's kind of similar.
Hmm.
I didn't expect to talk about Insurrection today.
Is that the one where they're riding around on dune buggies?
Not
Yes,
even. Wait, is that Dune?
unfortunately,
Okay.
That's the one that feels like an
But-
episode of the show the most.
but
yeah.
he's kind of like F. Murray Abraham in Insurrection.
Ruafo. That was his name.
He honestly, his like little digital portrait looks like he could be played by F. Murray Abraham too.
I'm just saying.
I have no idea what that means.
He's played some evil wizards in his day, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
That's really interesting that they got David Warner. It's always exciting when you see somebody like that show up in one of these old school PC games. I remember being like blown away that Tim Curry and Michael Dorn were in the Gabriel Knight games. Not Michael Dorn, like that's but I always forget that celebrity voices was a thing way back before they
I
were
mean, I don't
even
know that David Warner was a huge celebrity, and I mean, I guess he's probably hot off
Yeah.
The Secret of the Ooze. But
he was, he's in movies. He's a name.
yeah. No, he's great, and it's. I mean, honestly, you should just like YouTube a single scene of it just to. You'll chef kiss his delivery on any given line.
No,
It
you're
is
gonna
just
convince
so
me to try
imperious.
this goddamn game after struggling for the last month on this first game. I'm gonna be like, well, maybe I just will enjoy it if I do the next one. I mean, will I? Is it gonna be? You said it's immediately more fun and easy to play.
Honestly, I think you could try the opening dungeon, and if you're not more engaged in the first 2 hours, then yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to know the cast of Baldur's Gate 2?
Yes, lay it on me here.
All right. I'm going to go read through it. David Warner, main villain, John Hieronychus.
Yeah.
Charlie Adler, multiple voices. You might know him as both Cow and Chicken on Cow and Chicken.
It's a name.
D.
He's a
Bradley,
voiceover guy.
D. Bradley Baker, Michael Bell, Jeff Bennett. All of these are major voice actors.
Yeah, so far I don't know them.
D. Bradley Baker's huge. Yeah.
D. Bradley Baker, you might know him as. Oh my God!
A lot. Yeah, I want to say he's Michelangelo. Is that right?
I'm looking at his filmography, and it is almost like looking at an abacus.
Well, I know that a couple I know are in there. I know Jennifer Hale's in there somewhere. I know Tara Strong is in there.
Yeah, Jennifer Hale, Tara Strong, Michael Gow, who was Alfred in all of the Burton Batman movies and the other Batman movies.
And the Schumachers?
Yeah, and the Schumachers.
He was the only connective tissue, actually. Yes.
I thought you were going to say he was Alfred in Batman the Animated Series, but no idea.
No, that was Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
Nicely.
Oh,
nice. Yeah.
Of course you know that off the top of your head.
Of course I do. What do you think I am? Some kind of idiot? Some kind of rube?
Oh, I don't know. It's yeah. They again.
But yeah, the voice in these games is amazing. Like really good voice actors, and that's why
it's consolidated in two because there's a lot less voice acting in one.
Yeah, you were talking about how great voice acting was in these, and I was like, yeah.
I'm talking about. I am talking about two.
Yeah.
Damn it! I'm gonna play two. I'm gonna go pick up two and play two. Oh well.
It's just this is where I think BioWare really started their storytelling. Really started to respect character, voice, and speech and script.
script, I think, is the main thing here, because that gets to what I think is the main drawback of Baldur's Gate 1, and what was surprising to me going back, because I think, like I said, when I proposed this to John, I was conflating them so much that I was thinking that they were basically the same game, and they're not different. They're different because Baldur's Gate 2 must have 50 times the script that number 1 has.
Right.
That there are very, like, when you pick up a new character in Baldur's Gate 1, they probably have a quest that they want to put you on, but it's really like, go here, kill this thing, and then they'll say thanks. Now I can stay with you or leave, up to you. And then if they stay with you, that's it. They have nothing more to add really for the rest of the game, like nothing of note. And in 2, it seems like they have gotten over the idea of, we can do an open world game where we can really let the player go anywhere and do anything at any time, and just, sometimes they'll get killed doing that. And now, like, we can impose more of a story on here, and it's more interesting that way. We can have characters, the non-player characters can impose more of an effect on the story than we allowed them to do in Baldur's Gate 1.
This is why I had agitation whenever I had to leave somebody behind. Whenever or was introduced to a new character, it's like, oh, there's a bard now. Well, whose story is not important? Who am I missing out if I drop this guy? Those 2 guys in the woods at the beginning. I want to see what happens when I take them where they want to go, but then I don't get to take this old dwarf with me, and I want the old dwarf. So yeah, knowing that they didn't have anywhere to go kind of alleviates that a little, I suppose. But then you're saying in the second game they do have somewhere to go, so I would be up against the wall there too.
Well, we were being very flip about the romance stuff, and, like, and mocking it a lot, but there is some really great character stuff in 2, built around that. Like, you'd think it'd be very crude. I mean, and it does, like, so if you want to know something very unflattering about Baldur's Gate 2 as released in like 1999, is that there were like 6 romance options for a male character and 1 romance option for a female character. Um,
Yeah,
but so it's still a product of its time in some sense. I mean, if you're downloading it now,
that was that was unfortunate, but this, I think, really was the point where BioWare started to learn how to tell stories, because Baldur's Gate 1 was just a campaign. It wasn't a story. But
it was a series of challenges.
Yeah, it was a series of challenges. But Baldur's Gate 2 is a story. And it's also not a great game in 2021, but it was a genuine story.
Well, it's still in that same graphical engine, so it struggles to do like a cinematic, like when they need to do a dramatic story scene, it still has to take place with these tiny little sprites that are, even a couple years later, when you get to Knights of the Old Republic, like, those graphics are still dated now, but you can do a close up on somebody's face in that game in a way that makes the scene play more dramatically, in a way that you can't really do in the engine of Baldur's Gate. But, like, they are working harder at integrating story into it, and so, like, you would think that the romance stuff would be much more like crude than it is in later iterations, but actually, I didn't realize this from playing it, but in, like, doing a little bit of reading about it, there's all kinds of iterations it can take, and, like, to give you an example of the difference of how much more complex the party dynamics are in 2 versus 1. You can romance this one, like, elf woman in part 2, but if you have
Is
a
it the
particular
dark elf?
No, Aerie, the waif.
Yes.
But if you have another particular companion that you, like, a bard that you have picked up from another quest, he is also romantically interested in her, and if you are romancing her, he will eventually challenge you to a duel for her.
Yeah, I had that happen to me in the game,
and that's pretty cool.
that is pretty awesome. Yes.
And then the thing that I was blown away that I just found out yesterday is that there's this the one romantic option for the female character is this cleric who is like this boring ass guy that I never took on my party at any point, and it turns out that you have to do this this whole quest for him. You're supposed to try and help him get into this order of like of holy knights, and if you do that, if you succeed at that he gets a boost to his wisdom statistic, and he like kind of changes. He becomes a lot more useful to your party, but also like he's how he interacts with the rest of your party becomes completely different. He's a lot nicer to them uh, because he was kind of imperious and a little bit of a douche before. But if he fails, you can keep him with you, and apparently he becomes like a full blown like men's rights activist guy. He becomes super toxic to everybody, and goes. So it's amazing that there's like that. I like that. I never would have thought to like go through that because I would be thinking like, uh, why would I want to fail this task? Uh, but but it turns out there's a whole other role playing aspect to it. They started doing that. It's not just
That's really
you
impressive.
know
I
t-
mean, that's the stuff that makes them so incredible in the later
Yeah,
games.
I mean that is like what makes characters characters.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what I wasn't getting from Baldur's Gate 1 when we went back to it.
Yeah,
I won't belabor that point
Baldur's
anymore.
Gate 1 had some funny moments,
Mhm.
but it didn't really have much of a cast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it had flavor. It didn't have characters.
Right.
Which is kind of in line with old school D&D, really. When they were more obsessed with the math, when it was all about,
Mm.
like, well, this is my hexagons, and I am X many feet away, and that it's a math question, more than a character question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my final thought on that on the difference is that Baldur's Gate 1 was them figuring out if they could do this stuff,
Mm.
and then in a computer format, and then Baldur's Gate 2 is where they started figuring out like, okay, what can we do with this stuff? And that leads us into the later iterations of BioWare,
Yeah.
where they
Yeah.
start doing more cinematic,
Yeah,
more interactive
that's
stuff.
when they kind of figured out what we can do with characters, what can we do with game design, and what can we push further.
Yeah, and in one they're not pushing anything beyond just what second edition Dungeons and Dragons is, which is it's a feat in itself to have done it in that time with the resources they had.
Yeah,
But
I as I was being frustrated by this game in 2021, I was I was very cognizant of how I would have felt about it, playing it on my father's PC back, in the day at home, and really diving into all the numbers and the stats and how everything works, and checking out every map in its entirety, going on every plot quest and side quest. This is the stuff we did back then. This is how the games
absolutely,
were conditioned you to play them. And if I had somehow, I don't know how I missed this game, to be honest, but if I hadn't, I think I would have been obsessed with this, just like several people I know now, because it does have, I see it, how it would inspire a devotion to it. I think you had to be there at the time to really get the brunt of that, but it's there.
well, it
It's
certainly
clearly
inspires devotion because there's no way to do it casually.
there. Yeah.
Like it's devotion or nothing.
I mean, and it's not unlike D&D proper in that way, like
Yeah, yeah.
you have to kind of self-select to play D&D in a sense, because you
I
gotta
I
get
do
into it.
think in general it does work as a
Mhm.
game. It is confusing and weird if you think about it as a D&D thing, but when it's just doing the mechanics under the hood and you don't have to look at it, I think it actually does kind of work a bit.
Hey, well, I wanted to get back to something I was saying earlier about the difficulty, and how I tried to like go through this game more casually, and just sort of like evaluate the story and thinking that that's how we're going to look at it. And I was not really able to do that. Not so much because like I couldn't get myself to lower the difficulty level, but I tried playing it on a pretty easy difficulty, and I still was
Oh yeah,
just getting destroyed constantly.
they were really, really difficult games, and I do think at least part of that is again due to them being based on second edition,
Oh, absolutely.
which is such, as we've discussed pretty at length by this point, is just a mess of a system. Like, to hit armor class 0 is still the most nonsensical rule I've ever seen in any game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, but just the way that that it really like ended up for me was that finally I was like, okay, I'm at the end of the game. It's the first time it took me 22 years or whatever to finally reach the end of this game, and I kind of expected, like, based on I guess my experience with later Bioware games or just open world RPGs generally, that thing where if you're doing like a majority of the side quests, much like if you have a completionist bent to you, like a lot of us
Yeah.
do, if you're into these
Yeah.
games, you do a bunch of the side quests and then you go back to the main like story quests and you're just stupidly overpowered for them.
Yeah.
Love it. Yeah.
And I got to that last fight. I got to that last fight thinking like he'll probably be kind of a pushover the way that most like later Bioware big boss fights are. And oh no, he kicked the living piss out of me.
Oh yeah.
I had
Oh
put it down
god.
to the easiest level. I still could not. I couldn't get rid of one of his henchmen. I had to change it on story mode where you literally cannot die for the last encounter.
There are a lot of encounters, especially in Baldur's Gate 2, that are just punishingly difficult. Like a lot of it is like because I think it's on. I don't know if you had an option to turn it off, but friendly fire is something you really have to be aware of.
Yeah, there is an option to turn it off, but
yeah, I wasn't sure if there was or not.
Yeah, but even that didn't help me in the final boss fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's I mean, if you're not into that, to like, it doesn't sound like, if it's not fun to you, if you find it frustrating to have to reload the same fight like 8 or 10 times to
it's not for everybody. I do think there is a certain sense of accomplishment when you pull off just like a really good strategic combo.
Oh yeah,
in a fight, like there is. It's
we talked about this a bit earlier too. Like, and there's more sense of accomplishment when it takes you 10 tries to beat an actual dragon or a beholder or something. But when it's just a pack of gnolls, like it's aggravating.
Yeah. It's sort of the same reason I think people are so into those Souls games, which are definitely not for me.
Yeah,
that's interesting. I was cheating on Baldur's Gate with the Souls game. Actually, that's
well, I mean, and I guess later in BioWare's lifespan, they will sort of try and be more accessible.
Yeah,
make implement the RPG elements into a more action-oriented game type.
I'm really interested in seeing what Baldur's Gate 3 ends up actually being.
Oh, right.
Like, I know it's in some kind of playable form at this point, but I haven't really been following. I do know it's based on 5th edition, so it shouldn't be as just naked lunacy as the first 2 games.
Right. If I would bet $1 that it's closer to Dragon Age Inquisition and how it plays than Baldur's Gate 2.
I would say that is probably a pretty safe bet.
Is it at least top down? I would think it would have to be, and still.
I think it's like I think it's like where you can pull the camera out and in Inquisition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Brad, I have a question for you then. What would you say is the best fight system in a BioWare game?
The best fight system, I mean, some of them are so different from one another. Like, I can't really compare Mass Effect to any of the others.
Yeah, that is straight action, yeah.
I would say one of the more interesting ones is Jade Empire.
I agree.
In terms of, how you don't really have a party, you just have a companion character with you that depending on which one you have, it provides you a bonus to your single character. And it's still got a little bit of that, behind the scenes dice rolling in it, but it's a lot more action oriented. And I think it's definitely, I'm maybe not the best, but I think it's the most interesting.
Well, there's a lot of games that incorporate that like dice rolling element into an action, like Diablo, sort of, right?
Yeah, I mean,
kind of doing that under the hood, but just very quickly.
Yeah, but I mean, with Mass Effect, at least Mass Effect 2 and 3, and I guess this new rework of the first one, if you aim at something, you're gonna hit it.
Yeah, if it's in your sight, I guess.
Yeah, those are a very user friendly series of games for sure.
Yeah, and it's for that reason I can't really compare them to any of the other BioWare games, because it's like all the role-playing elements are, strictly role-playing elements, decision-making, quests, things like that. talking to characters, and the combat is like just a straight up third person shooter with some magic in it.
But we're going to start to see that transition, I think, next time. Because I think we'll do a specific Baldur's Gate 2 episode. We've decided as we went here.
Yeah.
And that's where they implement a little more of the role playing and the party interaction dynamics.
And the horniness.
And yes. And the just overall tumescence of that would come to define the brand.
It's like they were like, wait, we can do this.
Yeah.
This is going to define our company forever.
Horny guys on the internet turns out to have disposable income. So
I will say the weirdest black sheep of the Baldur's Gate franchise is still that PS2 game Dark Alliance, which is straight up just like a Gauntlet or Diablo clone.
Yeah,
I mean, that sounds like a decent idea.
Yeah,
it was like a solid, like, one of those games that's never going to be a hit. And if you saw it in a bargain bin, you might be like, hey, I like Baldur's Gate. And then you play it and it's fine. It's like, it's like a 5 to 6 hour game.
Yeah. I mean, if it's $5,
wow,
maybe.
Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
that sounds like in name alone, Baldur's Gate.
Oh yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's the
Yeah,
setting, it's the Forgotten Realms setting, it's the Forgotten Realms monsters. I think you do fight a beholder in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that also sounds antithetical to everything that the Baldur's Gate, main series is.
Pretty much. Pretty much. Probably the purest iteration of that Baldur's Gate style was the 2 Icewind Dale games, because they're so much just like you're being run through a campaign. Like, there's no unique characters. You create the entire party, and it's just you go through this module start to finish. Not much in the ways of side quests. And,
or characterization, really, I guess.
And it's all like kind of localized in this one town and surrounding mountain range.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably another one that there's no sense in playing at this time. It's
I would say if you're gonna go back to these kinds of games, the remasters for Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are out there, and they are, in terms of this style of computer RPG based on this system, warts and all, those are the best. I mean, those are clearly head and shoulders above pretty much anything else that had come before it. And I think the closest you can get to a game like that nowadays, like a modern game, is probably something like Pillars of Eternity or the Divinity series.
Yeah, it's always been on my list, the Divinity games.
They're big, and they have their own systems, but it's not based on Dungeons and Dragons, but they're real time commitments.
Right.
But I think they are worth the effort it takes to get into them. If you are into that kind of like top down, third person, swords and sorcery sort of experience.
I mean, I've heard similarly to Baldur's Gate, I guess, that the deal with Divinity is that the first one is a bit of a chore to get through, and then the second one is the fulfillment of the idea. Yeah.
That's what I've heard as well. So I skipped straight to Divinity Original Sin 2, and I always got really confused because there's another computer RPG series called Divine Divinity. And like I was never clear as to whether like that is what became Divinity, or if it was just if they're completely separate.
Or if it's the knockoff, it's the Transmorphers that's trying to like fool your grandma.
I'm pretty sure Divine Divinity is actually came out like there's actually a few of those games and spin-off games, and they came out years before I think the first Divinity did. I was always like, wait, is this one of those games?
Because the name Divine Divinity makes it seem like it has to be a Japanese translation of a title that made more sense.
It's not. I think it's Eastern European.
Oh, I love all these like Legendary Tournament of Legends, all that shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that we'll try. We have a lot of BioWare games to get through here before we start side questing into other studios.
Please tell me you're going to do that bizarre Sonic the Hedgehog RPG that they made.
They did that?
Ooh,
Yes,
I
that
forgot
was
about that.
BioWare on the DS.
That's the problem.
Ooh.
Yeah,
we have
I
to
mean,
find a port of it, I guess.
I mean, or just like watch a playthrough on YouTube, because I'm sure that exists,
Yeah, I might just
and
do
I'm
that.
and I'm sure it's probably kind of creepy.
I wonder if there's romance options.
Yeah, I was just saying,
Oh
if there are
God,
romance options.
I hope not.
I mean, somebody would really want that, I'm sure.
I
yeah.
doubt it, because that one was pretty clearly aimed at kids. It's just so weird that BioWare made it.
Yeah,
And I don't mean
Well,
just
that leads you to
public.
believe it's probably better than you would expect because of that. I have to assume.
I would not go that far.
Well, okay.
I mean,
Well, I think the main thing as we're going forward, we got a few more BioWare games to do, and one of the main things we'll be tracking is sort of this tension between the open world, let you do anything. Sort of like you're saying with Icewind Dale, where it's very non-specific.
it's a much more channeled experience.
Mhm.
Yeah, versus the more cinematic. We are telling a story with plot beats and a cast, and how that sort of puts rails on an experience that some people prefer to be completely wide open.
Like there's that whole big thing that happened with Fallout 4 was giving the main character an actual voice, which was something that turned off a lot of people, as opposed to, because it sort of broke immersion for them, because the character in Baldur's Gate, character in Icewind Dale, a character in Divinity. Now I'm getting them both mixed up in my head.
Divination Divine Divinity was
Divination Divine Divinity desktop edition. Those are your characters. That's like you in the game. Whereas with something like Mass Effect, you're Shepard.
Yeah, and you're
no matter. You have limited options. As you can play that Shepard how you want, but you are always going to be Shepard. You're not going to be some lunatic that just came out of a vault and hits people with a mannequin leg.
Yeah, you don't have the same options you talked about of just like murdering anybody you encounter anywhere in the world at any time. Again, we'll track this as we go forward. I find a lot of value in the more cinematic experience. I
think there's highs and lows for both styles. I don't think it's fair to consider one better than the other. It's just a matter of preference, and it's also a matter of what story is being told, how is it being told, and what is the story.
Yeah. Well, I think 20 years later now, Baldur's Gate 2 is still sort of considered a high point of open world do anything, but being able to still have a story, a coherent narrative.
It's still an extremely well regarded game.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna play Baldur's Gate 2.
I've got the remaster. I've been meaning to fire it up, but I keep getting distracted by Yakuza games. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. I love talking about BioWare games, and Baldur's Gate has a very warm spot in my heart.
Yeah. Well, we might hit you up again at some point. It's going to be. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'd love to come back.